A little faith is needed. From the video and book, It Makes Sense to Believe. This case hoped to show that we only need the tiniest amount of faith to believe, like that of a mustard seed, given the abundance of evidence and how much sense the Catholic faith makes in the context of what we know about life. That said, however, our faith does require us to trust and believe certain things. Let's consider 4 examples requiring belief. First, the Church teaches us that everyone descends from one set of first parents, that is, Adam and Eve. This is a matter of faith we must accept, even though science does not fully support it yet. The beauty of the Church position is we are all blood relatives, truly one human family. Contrast this to the idea of descending from many sets of first parents, and we might be tempted to think one race is more human or highly evolved than another. Looking back at slavery and Nazism, we see how this can end. The second example concerns Jesus' resurrection from the dead. The Church teaches Jesus rose from the tomb a couple of days after he died on the cross, which cannot be proven today aside from the Shroud of Turin and ancient witness accounts. Jesus definitely died, the crucifixion was brutal, and a Roman soldier thrust a spear into his side to make sure he was dead before taking him down. The apostles, who went into hiding out of fear, saw the resurrection as proof Jesus is who he said he was, the Son of God with power over death. What else explains their later courageousness to spread the faith and suffer martyrdom? Thomas, however, did not initially see the risen Jesus when his fellow apostles did. He would not believe their word until he touched Christ's wounds himself. The risen Jesus confronted Thomas on this and said, "Blessed are they who have not seen yet believe." The third example is about the Eucharist. The Church teaches us that the bread and wine consecrated at Mass by a priest become, in reality, the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. The Church bases this on the traditional understanding going back to the apostles and on what Jesus said, especially as recorded in the Gospel of John and the Last Supper narratives. Jesus said to a multitude who followed him, "Do not labor for the food which perishes, but for the food which endures to eternal life. I am the bread of life." At this the people murmured, and Jesus responded, "Do not murmur among yourselves. I am the living bread which came down from heaven. If anyone eats this bread, he will live forever. And the bread which I shall give for the life of the world is my flesh." The Jews and his disciples disputed among themselves, exclaiming, "This is a hard saying. Who can listen to it? How can this man give us his flesh to eat?" So Jesus insisted, "Truly, truly, I say to you, unless you eat the flesh of the Son of Man and drink his blood, you have no life in you. He who eats my flesh and drinks my blood has eternal life, and I will raise him up at the last day. For my flesh is food indeed, and my blood is drink indeed. He who eats my flesh and drinks my blood abides in me, and I in him." After this, many of his disciples drew back and no longer went about with him. Then Jesus asked the 12, "Do you wish to go away too?" During the Last Supper, Jesus took bread, blessed it, broke it, and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take this and eat. This is my body, which is given for you. Do this in remembrance of me." Then he took a cup, and when he had given thanks, he gave it to them, saying, "Drink of it, all of you. This is my blood of the covenant, which is poured out for many for the forgiveness of sins." The last example concerns our belief in all the words of God, even those that contain violence. In the second criterion, I listed some reasons in church teaching for believing that all the words in the Bible are true when properly understood. But a common criticism of our faith today centers around violent stories in the Old Testament and how these cannot be reconciled with a God who is love. Some faithful believe we should treat God's violent acts as allegorical, suggesting that they didn't really happen, but were written to dramatically teach spiritual lessons. This is akin to saying Jesus' warnings about damnation were to increase our concern, but were otherwise empty threats. My position is, if the biblical text reads like history, then it's best to believe it, even if the text is initially difficult to accept. Therefore, I believe God committed and commanded certain violent acts as written. For instance, I believe Jesus meant what he said when he warned, "As were the days of Noah, so will be the coming of the Son of Man. For as in those days before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage, until the day when Noah entered the ark. They did not know until the flood came and swept them all away. So will be the coming of the Son of Man. 2 men will be in the field, one is taken and one is left. 2 women will be grinding at the mill, one is taken and one is left. Watch therefore, for you do not know on what day your Lord is coming." When God committed or commanded certain violent acts, we have to trust his judgment. We don't know to what extent the people deserved it, or possibly for some this was their punishment before entering heaven, or maybe younger ones perished before they could sin. I don't know. But I am sure of this. These violent historical acts of God dramatically underscore how crucial it is to take our spiritual lives seriously and practice the faith. Noah, who was a righteous man and walked with God, brought his family into his saving ship. And so it is today, where the church is like Noah's ship. Our faith requires us to trust and believe certain things. But isn't all this possible for God? One pair of first parents, truly making all humanity one family. The resurrection of Jesus from the dead, proof of his divinity and power over death. The transformation of bread and wine into the body and blood of Christ, while retaining the appearance of bread and wine, an intimate way to take Jesus into our bodies. And the truthfulness of all God's words. Can we humble ourselves enough to see this is possible for God? The Jews found the teaching of Jesus that they must consume his body and blood revolting and impossible to accept. They weren't even allowed to consume animal blood, never mind human blood. Despite his numerous miracles and authoritative teaching, many walked away from Jesus. While we might not be bothered by Jesus' words concerning his body and blood, there are some things about the church that trouble us in today's culture.